Unfortunately, I got to do one more story on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here. This is not good for her. Take a look. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was among the least effective members of the last Congress, according to a new survey from the nonpartisan Center for Effective Lawmaking, a joint project of Vanderbilt University and the University of Virginia. AOC introduced a total of 21 bills, which the center defined as substantive. But that is where the story ends. Her legislation received no action in committees, no floor votes, and none ever became law, according to the center, which takes its data from Congress.gov. Quote, she introduced a lot of bills, but she was not successful at having them receive any sort of action in committee or beyond committee, and if they can't get through committee, they cannot pass the House. Alan Wiseman, a Vanderbilt political scientist and co-director of the center, told the Post. Quote, it's clear that she was trying to get her legislative agenda moving and engage with the lawmaking process, Wiseman added, but she wasn't as successful as some other members were, even among other freshmen, at getting people to pay attention to her legislation. So when you look at the numbers, among Democrats, she was 230th out of 240. 230th out of 240. Now, some might say, well, if you're the left flank of the party, this is just what's going to happen. That's actually not true, because I think they referenced, was it Rashida Tlaib? I think it was Rashida Tlaib, who actually ranked pretty well. She had a number of her bills were voted on. So, now, let's talk about how everybody's going to react to this, okay? What I saw, believe it or not, is the right is saying, no, that's actually not true. She's incredibly effective. That's weird. Well, why would they? This appears to be a relatively empirical way of judging it. You know what I mean? Like, there's very little opinion in this. They're just saying, look at the number of bills they proposed. How many got any action in committee? How many were voted on? How many became law? See, it's a very empirical way of looking at the situation when it comes to policy. But on Fox News, they had to say, oh, no, that's not true. She's actually one of the most effective. Now, why are they saying that? They're saying that because they want to have their boogeyman. They want to have somebody where, they could scare their 87-year-old audience about on a daily basis, and they've settled on AOC, and so they don't want to lose that as a propaganda argument that they make 24/7. And so they're insistent that, no, well, policy is not really the thing that matters the most. What matters the most is the culture, and she's impacting the culture more than anything, and so therefore we disagree with the way that they looked at this, and she's actually, incredibly effective. So that's what the right is saying. The left I actually haven't seen say anything on this. I think most of them are just dodging this report that came out, and they're not talking about it. But yeah, I could see... You could say, one argument the left could make is, well, it's not her fault that the rest of Congress is phenomenally corrupt and bought and owned by big money interests. And so, yeah, you might be an effective lawmaker and get your bills passed, but all your bills would suck, and they would serve Wall Street and the military-industrial complex and corporate America. And so... should we celebrate that? Should we call that effective? Sure, it's effective, but it's effective towards negative ends. So it's almost like, are you punishing her for actually being idealistic and having good ideas, and the rest of Congress sort of stonewalling her good ideas? So that's one argument that the left could make. They could say, hey, it's true, but that's not her fault. It's because the rest of Congress is so phenomenally corrupt, and she's not getting anything done because they're all corrupt and she's not. And so her priorities never get through. That's one way to look at it. The way I look at it is that's partly true, the left-wing theoretical argument I just made. But yes, it's also the case that she is, first and foremost, somebody who tweets all day and somebody who generates media attention. And is there something to be said about that? Sure. But is that the end-all be-all? No. And I do think the fact that she's this ineffective is an indictment on her. I do. Because, and this is a point I've made 1,000 times on this show, and you would think it shouldn't be controversial. But it is controversial. Now, you guys hear it and you might totally agree. But, there's a lot of people who say they agree and then go on to disagree with this in pretty blatant ways. So... the real way, if you're on the left and you want to get stuff accomplished in Congress. There's a few ways to do it. One way is doing the type of bipartisanship that's on your terms. So in other words, there are Republican congresspeople who want to end wars. There are. There's a number of them. So what you can do is you can work with the libertarian right on ending wars. You could work with the libertarian right on civil liberties and anti-Patriot Act stuff. You could work with them on ending the drug war. You can work with the few people who are populist right on like the $2,000 checks. There were a number of Republicans who supported the $2,000 checks. You could work with people on the populist right on trade policy because they say, okay, we want to increase U.S. manufacturing, and so we want to stop outsourcing jobs. You could work with them on stuff like that. So you can form alliances on very specific issues with different factions of the right. On some economic stuff, there's a handful of populist right people you could work with, and along with a number of people on the left who will work with you on that. And on, again, war, so foreign policy, civil liberties, the drug war, you can work with the libertarian right people who agree with you on that. And again, a number of people on the left as well. So that's one way of doing it. The bipartisanship on your terms, that would, and Ro Khanna has proven that this is effective. Because Ro Khanna did it, Bernie Sanders did it with Yemen. The whole Yemen thing to stop our support of the genocide in Yemen, that passed the House and that passed the Senate. It just died on Trump's desk. Okay, so, but this can be done. This stuff can be done. That's one way to do it. But in order to do that, you need to not use the language of, oh, all my colleagues on the right are irredeemable deplorables. And, you know, they want me killed and they're terrible people and they're bigots and they're racist and this and that. Now, can you criticize them when they're wrong about stuff? Of course you can, and you should. But you need to be clear and specific and don't be vituperative and over the top and hyperbolic and unnecessarily dramatic. And unfortunately, I think that's what AOC does all the time. So she's ineffective. You know, nobody really likes her there. Now, some of that you can blame on them, of course, but some of that you got to look in the mirror. So that's one way to get stuff done. The other way to get stuff done is the strategy that is even more, you know, impossible for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other people on the left, and it's honestly pathetic, but it's true. Copy the Tea Party approach, you know? So it should be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ro Khanna, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, Raul Grajava. There should be a block, Ilhan Omar, of like a dozen left-wing Congress people who are willing to hold bills hostage and who are willing to play, you know, aggressive politics, who are willing to block things when things need to be blocked, who are willing to band together and build coalition and take out the flamethrower when necessary to get people to fall in line. You would be so much more effective if you actually were principled and unapologetic and aggressive on issues where you can build that coalition and hold that coalition. But they seem fundamentally incapable of mounting a public pressure campaign. They seem fundamentally incapable of taking on the fights that need to be, you know, that need to be taken head on. And the result is, if you're not going to act like the Tea Party and have a coalition that's aggressive and direct in blocking bills and pushing your own bills, and you're not going to do bipartisanship on your terms and, you know, build bridges on specific issues, well, what's left? What's left is you rank, what is it, 230 out of 240 or something like that? You're going to rank 230 out of 240, and none of your stuff's even going to get a committee hearing. Definitely none of this stuff is going to be voted on. None of it's going to become law. So I just don't think she's good at the job of legislating. I don't. Now, again, some of that, to be fair, is because by definition, a lot of the stuff that she would focus on, that she would care about, like, for example, I think the first bill she proposed was limiting the interest rate, like predatory interest rates. I think it like made it so that nobody could charge more than 12% interest, right? And, you know, you have payday loan industry sharks who charge 200% interest. And so it would ban loan sharking effectively. It would ban predatory payday loans. And it would go after big financial institutions as well and limit the amount of interest they could charge. So yes, you can make the argument Congress is never going to go for that because they're so bought and owned by financial industries that they're not going to go along with an idea that's so good for the people and so bad for their donors. So yes, I want to be clear. There is truth in that criticism that her agenda by definition is harder to get through because it's for the people, and Congress is not for the people. I think that's true. But I also think, there's a reason why Bernie Sanders was way more effective at getting stuff done. And do an apples to apples comparison. However, take the same time period for Bernie Sanders and he got a lot more accomplished. Number one, they called him the Amendment King. He always managed to get amendments into unrelated bills that were phenomenal for the people. Number two, he worked with Ron Paul on a number of things that were successful. That's the libertarian right and the populist left working together. He worked with Mike Lee on the thing involving Yemen. He's similar ideology to her, but he actually gets shit done. So he's just better at playing the game of legislating. And I just don't think she's that good at it. Some of it's not her fault, but some of it is her fault. And I honestly, I think it's really sad. So the left needs to get their act together. And, I'm partly to blame for this because when we co-founded Justice Democrats, I naively thought if you just get people in positions of power who agree on the policy stuff, they're there for Medicare for all, they're there for free college, they're there for living wage, they're there for ending the wars, they're there for ending the drug war, so on and so forth, that's it. Everything else would take care of itself. No, it turns out there's a lot more that goes into it. They need to be right on the policy, but then they need to be intelligent strategically, and they need to be leaders with phenomenal backbone that's incredibly rare. And so if you don't have those second pieces of it, then what do you have at the end of the day? Somebody in power who's ineffective but is a phenomenal tweeter. Not going to get much done. And now we know empirically that's correct.